In this video presentation, we'll be covering Moodle's data definition and the upgrade APIs. These two APIs are closely connected, as you'll see in the presentation, but the data definition API is distinct from the data manipulation API, which is covered in a separate presentation. This video is an extract from the 12-lesson Moodle plugin development by example course. A link to the course page is in the description. But before we start, if this video proves to be useful and informative, please don't forget to like it. So before we dive into our XML, our install.xml file, let's have a look at the data definition API. This API allows you to create, change, delete tables and fields in the database, particularly during upgrades. Plugins must use this API to manage table schemas, as there's that high-level abstraction that ensures that the resultant table will work, or the resultant tables will be valid in the supported databases. And upgrades are handled by the upgrade API, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. Okay, so the initial schema definition for tables is done in the plugins install.xml file in the DB folder. Now, that's what I've said a little earlier on. This is the file that is used to create the tables when the plugin is first installed. And it must always contain the most up-to-date definitions. So as you go version to version, you update your install XML if you change your data schema, and it must always be the latest version of the tables that are required for the version that the person has installed. Okay, this is important because if you don't do that, you end up with a mismatch between what your code is expecting to be in the tables and what the tables actually are. Okay, Moodle tables are normally named with a prefix. Okay, and that prefix is defined in our config.php file. Therefore, when you're stipulating table names in code, you do not mention the prefix. What happens is it's automatically prefixed on the name when the call is made to the database, because that can change. The default is MDL underscore. So when you want to use the data definition API, you usually will do it via the global database manager class, which is defined in the file that's on the screen there. And you normally get an instance of that class by calling the global DB get manager method. All the objects used for data manipulation are extensions of XMLDB underscore object. And again, I've given you the file, the place where it's defined. And you've namely got three kind of objects. There you've got your table, your field, and your index. And in most cases, you are always passing one of the objects to the methods in the database manager class. Okay, there are quite a few constants defined in the manager for the use of the data definition API. So your database field types like integer, number, float, text, etc. Indexes and keys, so key primary, key foreign, index, etc. And then there are other constants like not null, sequence, unique, and not unique. So these are the constants that are used when working with the definition API. Right, so you got some methods. So you can check if a table exists, etc. Drop a table. You can create fields, check if fields exist, change their names, rename fields, etc. And then the same with indexes. You can check if it exists, find an index, drop an index, etc. So there's a link to the documentation there in this presentation for you to go and have a look at the documentation itself. Okay, so since your install XML file has the latest definitions of your database tables, what happens if somebody is upgrading? Well, if they're upgrading and you have made changes to your schema, then you need to manage how do you get that person's database to reflect the latest version of the database that you need to have, as will be specified in your install XML file. So the upgrade API uses the data definition API functionality to actually take your tables from one version to the next, to the latest version. Okay. The upgrade API that's its main function, is to get your tables to the level at which install XML would make tables if you're installing brand new. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, right. So the upgrade API is called in your upgrade.php file in your DB folder, and it should contain code that is specific to each upgrade change in a single function. And that's the function. So you've got your plugin type, plugin name, so your component name, your Frankenstein name underscore upgrade prefixed with XML DB underscore. There's a link in this presentation again to look at the upgrade API. So that's it for the presentation. To watch other extracts from the course, click on the playlist link, or alternatively, watch the video describing the course content. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and thanks for watching.